another man's wife, and if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and giveth it in her hand, and sendeth her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after that she is defiled. For that is abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. When a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife which he hath taken. No man shall take the nether or the upper millstone to pledge, for he hath taken a man's life to pledge. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. Take heed in the plague of leprosy, that thou observe diligently, and do according to all that the priests the Levites shall teach you. As I commanded them, so ye shall observe to do. Remember what the Lord thy God did unto Miriam by the way, after that ye were come forth out of Egypt. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case thou shalt deliver him the pledge again, when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee, and it shall be righteous unto thee before the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren, or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee. The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Thou shalt not pervert the judgment of the stranger, nor of the fatherless, nor take a widow's raiment to pledge. But thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf in the field, thou shalt not go again to fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hands. When thou beatest thine olive tree, thou shalt not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When thou gatherest the grapes of thy vineyard, thou shalt not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command thee to do this thing.
Psalm 37 of David. Do not fret because of evil men, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass they will soon wither, like green plants they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. For evil men will be cut off, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy great peace. The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. But the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow, to bring down the poor and needy, to slay those whose ways are upright. But their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. Better the little that the righteous have than the wealth of many wicked. For the power of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The days of the blameless are known to the Lord, and their inheritance will endure forever. In times of disaster they will not wither. In days of famine they will enjoy plenty. But the wicked will perish. The Lord's enemies will be like the beauty of the fields. They will vanish, vanish like smoke. The wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. Those the Lord blesses will inherit the land, but those he curses will be cut off. If the Lord delights in a man's way, he makes his steps firm. Though he stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. I was young, and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, or their children begging bread. They are always generous and lend freely. Their children will be blessed. Turn from evil and do good. Then you will dwell in the land forever. For the Lord loves the just and will not forsake his faithful ones. They will be protected forever, but the offspring of the wicked will be cut off. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. The mouth of the righteous man utters wisdom, and his tongue speaks what is just. The law of his God is in his heart, his feet do not slip. The wicked lie in wait for the righteous, seeking their very lives, but the Lord will not leave them in their power, or let them be condemned when brought to trial. Wait for the Lord and keep his way. He will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you will see it. I have seen a wicked and ruthless man flourishing like a green tree in its native soil, but he soon passed away and was no more. Though I looked for him, he could not be found. Consider the blameless, observe the upright. There is a future for the man of peace. But all sinners will be destroyed. The future of the wicked will be cut off. The salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him.
Second Corinthians chapter 8. Now, brethren, we wish to make known to you the grace of God, which has been given in the churches of Macedonia, that in a great ordeal of affliction, their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of their liberality. For I testify that according to their ability and beyond their ability, they gave of their own accord, begging us with much urging for the favor of participation in the support of the saints. And this, not as we had expected, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and to us by the will of God. So we urged Titus that, as he had previously made a beginning, so he would also complete in you this gracious work as well. But just as you abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge, and in all earnestness, and in the love we inspired in you, see that you abound in this gracious work also. I'm not speaking this as a command, but as proving through the earnestness of others the sincerity of your love also. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. I give my opinion in this matter, for this is to your advantage, who were the first to begin a year ago, not only to do this, but also to desire to do it. But now, finish doing it, so that just as there was the readiness to desire it, so there may also be the completion of it by your ability. For if the readiness is present, it's acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. For this is not for the ease of others and for your affliction, but by way of equality. At this present time, your abundance being a supply for their need, so that their abundance also may become a supply for your need, that there may be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little had no lack. But thanks be to God who puts the same earnestness on your behalf in the heart of Titus. For he not only accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he has gone to you of his own accord. We have sent along with him the brother whose fame in the things of the gospel has spread through all the churches. And not only this, but he has also been appointed by the churches to travel with us in this gracious work, which is being administered by us for the glory of the Lord himself, and to show our readiness, taking precaution so that no one will discredit us in our administration of this generous gift. For we have regard for what is honorable, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. We have sent with them our brother, whom we have often tested and found diligent in many things, but now even more diligent because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and fellow worker among you. As for our brethren, they are messengers of the churches, a glory to Christ. Therefore, openly before the churches, show them the proof of your love and of our reason for boasting about you.
Do good and lend, causing no one to despair, and your reward will be much, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Therefore be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Therefore show kindness, even as your Father shows kindness. For out of the abundance of the heart of a man speaks the mouth of him. But love your enemies, do good and lend, causing no one to despair, and your reward will be much, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Therefore be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Therefore show kindness, even as your Father shows kindness. For out of the abundance of the heart of a man speaks the mouth of him.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Today is not one of those days to have one of those clever sermons that we usually give. Today we're talking about stewardship, so I'll be talking more than preaching. And talking about stewardship, you can't go away without talking about giving. And I don't like hearing about giving as much as you don't like hearing about it. It's not a nice topic to try and explain. To each one of us, it's got a different meaning. However, the gist of my sermon will be giving to God what you have promised. Let's change it a little bit and say, do what you have promised to God. And it's not always easy. There'll be a few people in the Bible we'll refer to, and you can see what giving meant to them. And we will then try and see what we can do about our stewardship life. The topic of tithing and giving 10% has been a huge topic that's been discussed in the church. And a decision has not yet been made what the 10th actually means. A 10th can mean a 10th of your gross income. A 10th can mean, a tithe can mean 10% of your net income. Or 10%, the tithe could mean 10% of what you have left after you've done everything. And many of us, God will have to pay us because we'll be in the negative after we have done everything. So it's a difficult topic to discuss. I read one person wrote that it depends on what financial situation you take, whether it's communistic or whether it's socialist or whether it's capitalist. So this 10% discussion or tithing can take us quite far. So let us just stick to doing what we have promised God. I read a story of a man who took his family to the church, and as he was driving home with his family in his car, he was complaining about everything that happened in the church. He said the music was too loud, the sermon was too long, the announcements were very unclear, the building was too hot, and the people were very unfriendly. And he went on and he went on. Anything that he could complain about, he complained. And his son, who was sitting quietly there, And you know how they suddenly just say something. And his son said, "Dad, you've got to admit, it wasn't a bad show for just 10 rand. Apparently his dad had only given 10 rand. So he was saying, "I can't understand why you're complaining this much. It wasn't a bad show for just 10 rand. In the gospel reading of today, Jesus says about giving, I read it from the Bible as it's written there. It says, "For the measure you give will be the measure you receive." And then he goes further and he says, "A good measure." And he goes further and he says, "Pressed down." The good measure I could understand, the pressed down, I had to think a little bit about it. Now, some of you who have been in taxis like me would know, when a taxi goes and fill up, they're usually careless of the people who are inside. Usually shake it in order to shake the petrol. Haven't you been in taxis? And they put in more petrol and they shake it violently again, oblivious to the people who are inside. And I take press down like that, trying to get in more than what you have been given. Shaken together. I don't know whether you have been to a bar before. There are many people who've never been in a bar and who've never had something to drink, so they don't know what I'm going to talk about. But you get there and you get some of these things that they mix there. You've seen that. Things that they call mojitos and things like that. Come on now, there's some people who know that. Or are you real Christians? They shake it and they shake it together so that it can have a nice taste. And the last one is running over. Running over, it will be overflowing. And it will be put into your lap. It means if you give, God will give you a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, and put it in your lap. Now, let's just look at 3 instances in the Bible, and then you can think for yourself about it. There's a story of 2 sons, Cain and Abel, in the Bible. The one was tilling the lands, vegetables and fruit and all that. That is Cain. And Abel was farming with flock. And then it was time for them to sacrifice to God. It doesn't say what Cain had done wrong, because Cain's sacrifice was not accepted by God. I've read a few of the versions of the Bible. It doesn't say what he did wrong, but it tells you what Abel did right. And then you can think for yourself what Cain must have done wrong. It says Abel gave God a fatling first fruit of his flock. First fruit must have been a lamb, first fruit, which was fattened, because those days anything they were going to sacrifice was kept apart from the rest of the flock and fattened. And it says Abel gave first fruit a fatling of his flock, and God accepted his offering. Then it goes, it says, Cain gave fruit of the ground. It doesn't say he gave first fruit of the ground. It also doesn't say he gave the best fruit of the ground. It just says he gave fruit of the ground. So the fruit that Cain must have given was not acceptable to God. I think he didn't give God the best of his produce of the land. And that is why his sacrifice was not acceptable to God. So in that you can see what stewardship and giving is all about. The second person I'm going to refer to is Hannah in the Bible. Hannah, who was the second wife, together with Peninnah. Peninnah was the other wife and Hannah was the other wife. And Peninnah had children and Hannah didn't have. And Hannah went to the church or to the temple to pray to God in order to bear a child. Now there's a difference to having children and bearing a child. Women would know what I'm talking about. Hannah didn't actually want a child for herself, but she wanted to prove to Peninnah that she can also bear a child. There's a difference between the two. And she prayed to God to open her womb so that she can at least have a child and bear a child. And she promised God that when God gives her the child, she's going to give the child back to God. It's not the fact that of having a child, it's a fact of bearing a child. Because that was the insult that she was getting from Peninnah, who was the second wife. And when God gave Hannah, or opened Hannah's womb, and she bore a son by the name of Samuel, she took Samuel after she had weaned him, and she took him to the temple, and she gave him back to God. God had done what she had wanted, opened the womb to bear a child. She didn't want a child. God can have the child. She just wanted to bear a child. And you know what God did? God gave her 5 extras. After she had given Samuel to him, God gave her 3 sons and 2 daughters. It seems as if you give 1, God will give you 5. She kept her promise that she had made with God. And that is the gist of the thing. Keeping your promise with God for what God has done for you. The last person I'm going to refer to is Jephthah. You'll find him in Judges. If you go and you read Judges, starting from chapter 11, you'll find Jephthah there. Now Jephthah was a child born out of wedlock. The Bible says from a prostitute. And when the lady of the house thereafter got her own children, they chased Jephthah away. And they said he can't inherit anything there. And Jephthah left, and he became a leader of renegades. At that time, Israel was attacked by the Amorites. And the people went to Jephthah and asked him to come and lead them against the Amorites. And Jephthah first didn't want to come. He said, "You chased me away. Why do you want me now when you're in trouble?" However, he went, and this is his promise that he made to God. He said, "God, I'm going to go out and fight a battle. Your people have called me. Now I'm going to lead your armies into battle. If you stay with me and I win my battle, when I come back, I'll offer to you the first thing that comes out of my house." And he left, won his battle, and he came back. And as he was approaching his house, his daughter came out dancing and singing to welcome him home. And he only had one daughter. And he said to her, "What have you done?" She said, "What? I just came. I'm happy that you're back. I'm dancing before you." He says, "I've made a promise to God that the first thing that comes out of my house I will sacrifice to him." And she said to him, "Keep your promise to God. Just give me 2 months so that I and my companions can go into the mountains and I can cry out for my virginity." And he allowed her to go, and 2 months thereafter, he sacrificed her to God. What did he do? He kept his promise to God. God gave him worlds of children thereafter for the one that he had sacrificed. Jesus gave himself. The King gave himself out to die as a rogue for us, because dying on the cross was an insult. Only rogues were hung on the cross. And Jesus gave himself to reconcile us back to God. He opened our way into heaven by giving his own life. And then we have to think about what we can do about giving, about our stewardship. And people always think that we're talking only about money. It's not about money only. It's about giving your time, and it's about giving your talents, and also giving your treasure. Many of us, and I know possibly all of you, will say, "Hey, Father, we do not have time. I would really like to go and serve, but I do not have time." You know, when we're going to have a vestry meeting, I don't know whether it happens here, but where I'm coming from, and from the Eastern Cape where I'm coming from, it always happens the same. When there's going to be a vestry meeting, the church will be as full as this. And after the service, when the meeting starts, only a quarter of the people are left, the rest have gone. Because people say they do not have time to serve. And then what's most irritating, I'm sorry to say that, is that the 3/4 that left are complaining like the man I spoke about first. Are complaining about everything. The church is too hot, sermons are too long. It's important for us to give of our time to the church. It actually becomes a blessing when God blesses you for the time that you give to him. I've seen that in my own life. I've given much of my time to God. There was a stage when I was studying, let's leave the other things, the law and all the other things. When I was studying my master's in business, I was called on to do quite a lot of work in the church. And most of the times when I was writing exams on a Sunday, or on a Monday, I would be in church like now. And there's still about a few chapters that I haven't read. Never study when you're old as me, study when you're young. Because my wife was also irritating on the side, and the children irritating on the side, and the church irritating on the side. All of that there. But usually on Mondays when I got there, I said, God, remember, Chief, I was doing your service yesterday. You either make sure that when the paper is open, they ask me questions I know, or you're going to help me through writing for those 4 hours that I have to write. And let me assure you, and I'm honest about that, I've never failed any subject that I've wrote on a Monday. Because he blessed me for what I have done in giving my time to the church. Let's talk about talents. Let's leave the time. Each of us have got a talent that God has given us. And I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know whether it's a true story, but I was told by one of the guys who's a chorister. And you know the Anglican choirs, they good singers. Yesterday I was at a funeral of my wife's sister, my sister-in-law, older sister-in-law, and I nearly joined the Zion Church because there were no notes. I really nearly joined. I even heard them sing one of their songs for me when I had to thank the people. But this guy tells us, he says, when they were in this choir, Anglican church choir, it's an Anglican church choir. He says they had, you know, Anglicans, if you want to hear an Anglican church choir sing, come from Easter Sunday going past. That's when the notes are running at a little bit high levels. And the sopranos and the tenors sing. And the altos and the basses, they're usually just accompaniment. You don't count them. And he said we had this lady, they had this lady, and he said it was the best chorister that they have ever heard of. But she didn't come to practices. You know, when people have been in church for a long time, they know the hymns without even singing them. They know the notes are up here. And on Sunday, she's one of those that you can't say you didn't come to practice because you're just happy that she's there. And usually the start of the service, when we're singing the introits, she's usually not there. When they start and they struggle with the first hallelujah and all that, she's not there. And she will come in when they get to the second verse. And then she will get there to her space, because her space is always open. And she will put down her handbag, take out her hymn book and prayer book, and go on her knees. And then they had finished the third verse, and they're struggling like hell to get this thing up there. And the congregation is not helping much. And when they get to the fourth verse, she gets up. And she just takes it away. Now, I don't know whether you know good choristers. I also listen to good choristers. Good choristers always sing a bit earlier than the others and ends a bit later than the others. But because of the way she was singing, you know, it was allowed for her to go, because she would just take it apart. And when they get into the 5th verse, everybody is just up there in the levels. She is taking it along. But always she's doing something that wants to show everybody that I have got the singing talent here. And at funerals, she's worse. I don't know whether you've gone to funerals where we're coming from in the Eastern Cape. It's like a whole day party. We start at 10 and we finish at 4. And you will see her singing and hear her singing in all the glory that there is. When she sings psalms, she's at her best. But because she's got this, I get in first and the rest follows and I end off last, it's always the best. But she didn't do what she was supposed to do with the talent that God gave her. She became proud of the talent that God gave her. She became sick and had something on her vocal cords, went for an operation, and she came back. She could hardly sing alto. You know, altos and basses don't know how to sing. And for a person who hardly could sing alto, it must have been very bad. What has God done? She hasn't kept her promise of a talent that she had to offer to God. What has God done? He's taken his talent away. It's important for us, for the talents that we have, to give. The one who got 5 talents came back and gave 5 more. The one who got 2 talents came back with 2 more. The one who was given 1 talent decided, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to give him back his talent. The others were rewarded double so, and this one was chased away. The important thing that I'm trying to say to you is, I'm sure during Stewardship Month you also will be given forms on which you're going to make promises to God. Don't look at the form. Sit down, pray about it, fast about it, and let God guide you in what you can do. And when God has guided you in what you've got to do, and you write down there what you're going to do to God, for God, just keep your promise. That's all that God wants you to do. Forget about the 1/10 and the tithings. I listened to 2 charismatic priests to try and find out what this was all about, and they scared me more about hell than I would like to scare you. Just do what you promise God. If you promise to serve God, do that. My wife and my children are driving up today. I flew back yesterday because I had promised God that I will serve him. If I can't get out of it in a good way, then I've got to go and serve God. And God blesses you as you go on. Gives you more, and he gives you more, and he gives you more. And later it's overflowing. You don't know what to do with it. I'll end up with a story. This is a true story. I'm not talking, the other one I don't know whether it was truth. But this one is a true story. When I was in the Diocese of Port Elizabeth, we were called together because the diocese was struggling with finances. And we were called, all of us, church wardens, treasurers, academics, all of us were there to discuss how we can assist in the church in financing. And you should have heard what strategies Christians came up with. In some instances they said, if you don't give, we're not going to give you Holy Communion. There must be tickets at the door. You bring your ticket and we give you our ticket. And let me tell you, we started at 8 in the morning. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had not yet got anything concrete on the table. And there was an older gentleman who was sitting there. He didn't say a thing during the whole planning session. By the way, he was a white older gentleman, senior citizen. He had on a black suit, white shirt, pure white shirt, and a beautiful tie on. I still see that man in my dreams. And at about 4 o'clock he stood up, he put up his hand and he stood up. And he said, I've been listening to all that have been said here. And I'm just going to give you my life story, and you can do with it what you think about it. And he said, I worked at the railways. Now, I don't think many of you knows what working at the railways meant in those years. In the 70s and that. In those times they had teams of workers that worked in the railways. It was not a machine that fixed the rails, it was people who were working there. And he says, I worked at the railways, did not have a good education. I left school in Standard 4 and I had to work on the railways. And he said, I promised God that I will give him 1/10 of my salary every month. And he said, I did that from the first paycheck I got. And later on he got married and he had children, and he said, I kept to my promise. And he says, I had 3 children. One of them became a doctor. One of them became an attorney. And I can't remember the third one. I've been struggling to remember what he said about it. But they were all 3 in good professions. And he says, I never paid a cent at university. I don't know how it happened, but they got all of that. And he said, when I retired and I got my lump sum, I took 10% of that and I gave it to God. And he say, my children are educated. I don't know how it happened, and I've never wanted for anything. I still have a good life. He says the only reason is because I kept my promise to God. And God gave me a good measure, pressed down like the vehicle I told you, shaken together, running over. And he says, I praise God. and it was as quiet as you are. And we closed the meeting without having any strategy of what to do. And we just continued, and the church struggled on. And I think the reason why the church is struggling on is because we do not keep our promises that we make to God. We can't expect Him to keep His promises with us. He's a good God. He's a faithful God. He's a generous God. But if you have made a covenant with Him, He expects you to keep your covenant, and He will keep His with you. This is another story. Quickly now, I'm going to sit down. I've wasted a lot of your time. This guy had 100 rand left of all his money, and he was struggling, and it was bad. And he prayed to God. He said, God, I'm going to go to the casino this afternoon, and this is my last 100 rand. And if I win anything, I'm going to give you 10% of that. And he went there, and he won 1,000 rand. And he went to church on Sunday, and he gave 10 rand. And the following time he went again, he said, God, if you see, if you let me win, I'll give you 10%. I don't think God is stupid. God can count. He's a mathematician. He went there and he played again with his 100 rand, and he won 100 rand. And as he came back, he was saying, God, what kind of a man are you? Last time I went with 100 rand, you gave me 1,000 rand. Now you take me there again, and you just give me 100 rand. And the answer was, you gave me 10%. So 10% of 1,000 rand, you gave me 10 rand, and 10 rand is not 10% of 100,000 rand. So I'm giving you 100 rand, and you can give me the 10 rand. So keep your promises with God. It's important. It's usually a struggle to talk about giving and all that, and people don't want to listen to that. But my advice to you is give to God what you promise to give Him. And let it never be heard, and this happens quite a lot, when you're doing something and God increases what He is doing for you, and after 5 years you say, now I've done enough, others can take over. The Bible says, the more you do, God pulls you to do more. So that's why it's increasing what you're doing. And if you stop and you say, the others can do, now I'm going to say, I've been a church warden for too long, let the others do. Then you're going to wane away. I've seen that happen. People wane away and they later disappear. And they become grumpy mothers and fathers of the church because God is not blessing them anymore. So keep your promises with God. I end up with that today. And I think this is the last sermon in this session that I have with you. And I hope that I haven't bored you a lot. Amen.